Well, this is part one of a short series that we're doing on the life of Daniel. Daniel's one of those figures in the Bible that is, he's a character that all of us can learn from. He's a righteous man. He's a wise young man. He's a noble man that does great things that affect not only himself, but also his friends and the community around him. He changes the world in great ways. And he does it while living in a foreign land, under a foreign king, under foreign gods. So how does he do it? What did he have? What did he know? What made Daniel special? What made him unique so that way he could live a life in radical opposition to the world around him? That's what we're jumping into. This is part one in the life of Daniel, the Kavod Family Podcast. Well, welcome to the Kavod Family Podcast. My name is Casey Wilson. We have Travis Shook and Justin Bonner. Good morning, gents.
What's up?
Morning.
I think that was loud enough.
That's a fit aid. Nothing else, just fit aid.
All right. Well, we have finished a longer series that we did. It was probably our longest series that we've actually put together. And it culminated in this project that we did in-house. Justin wrote a book. And if you enjoy the banter and you enjoy the conversation around these themes, listen to the podcast. That's really where the fun is in it. And it kind of fleshes things out. Straight to the nitty gritty. If you want to get to the point, this book that you put together is a summation of every one of those episodes in short form.
Yeah, so those were the inspiration. I think we talked about this a few podcasts ago. The podcast were off of the chapters of the book. Yes. So as I was writing them, we would just take them and more conversationally address what was in each of those chapters.
Application,
so
real
the
life
book,
stories.
the book, it's like 3 to 4 pages, sometimes 2 pages per chapter. You know, it's really easily digestible, hopefully read in kind of a devotional way. Yeah. If you read it 5 days a week, you'll get through it in a little over a month if you read one a day and think about it. I mean, that's kind of the way I would suggest doing it. The goal is not to sit down and actually read it. Crush it out on a Sunday afternoon. No. You could, and then go back and read it again, but it's supposed to be something a little bit more meditative and something to chew on. You know, the beast that wasn't cursed in the Old Testament was the one that chewed the cud, and so we want to be the applications way,
the applications that you put in here are actually really good. And if you've used war prayers at all, that book that we created, if you've used that at all in your devotional time or just in your daily reading or with your children as you drive to school and drop them off or work or whatever, if it's just a resource you have, I think this would complement that in the same vein. It's probably going to be the thing. I know the audiobooks, it should, in fact, when this is live, there's a good chance that this book is available for purchase and the audiobook is available. If not, in a matter of days, it will be. We're going to release it immediately. But I know, like, my boys and I, as we drive in the morning or if we, take a drive during the day, I'll have them listen to it. It's 90 seconds, 2 minutes. There's an application point that we could talk through and process through. Or if I'm just alone in the truck, there's a great application to each chapter and allows me to process the content that's there. Becoming a faithful man, becoming a charitable man, becoming, not violent, not a drunk, all the themes, the qualities, the characteristics that we went through. Great book. This was really, if anything, this was our attempt at diving into what there's 4 large pillars that we talk about a lot around Kavod: identity, calling, forging, and then the reigning process. This happens in everyday life. It's really not
linear.
No, it's not. And even for youngsters, it would be the process that you'd want your young boys to go through to get them to the point that they're actually faithful and then imparting to their friendships and like leading and guiding rather than just being influenced by others.
Well, we called them pillars, when it was just 4 things, over a year and a half ago, it was just these 4 things: identity, call, forge, reign, kind of this process. And when we put language to it in saying that it was these 4 pillars, it's really this idea that you're building a house, you're building your life. And when you build a house, the 4 corners, you can think of like an ancient Roman building. There's 4 pillars and all 4 of the pillars are present at the same time. And if you remove any of them, then the structure will collapse. So you don't move on from your identity. You don't move on from the forging process just because you've now been sanctified in this one area, right? Like all 4 of those things are always present and are always going to be present in your life that you're trying to build as you're being built up as a man of God.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not leaving them. You're actually building with them.
Yeah, exactly. It's in some ways it is linear, but in a lot of ways it's not. Because like in the beginning, you're processing through your identity. And then once you grasp that, but at the same time, you're being forged and you're stepping into your calling, and if you're like a father, you're reigning, you're learning how to reproduce that. So you're in all of them at the same time. But when you look back, you're like, okay, I'm seeing where I was and what I was working on and what I was being refined in. It's good.
So this first book really was kind of an application of identity. I mean, there's a lot in here on identity, who you are, who you're called to be, the world around you, your relationships, your household, the Bible, how it's the source and the primary source of life for yourself. I mean, a lot of that has to do with identity. We are, where we're at right now is we're going to do 4 weeks, and we're going to go through the life of Daniel. This is kind of be more of a step into a Bible study in some ways. It won't be just a Bible study. It'll be a lot of conversation, life. You'll hear us talk about those themes: identity, calling, forging, and then the reigning process as we go through these 4 episodes. But on the back end of that, we're going to start up again a longer series, and it's really a large work that we've been preparing. Gosh, it's been in work for the last 2 years. We've wanted to do this, and I hope it comes together well, but it builds out.
Pressure.
And and there'll be another book that comes by the end of the year, in-house, Kavod Press publication, that kind of really paints that high meta narrative of life when it comes to the gospel and its effect on our life, when it comes to identity, when it calls to our calling. What exactly is a Christian called to do in life? If you're a son of God, what are you called to do? If you're a daughter of God, what are you called to do? What does it look like to be sanctified, and how does the gospel do that rather than just the world around us? And then truly, what has God called us to reign in? Because we're not meant to be passive in this life and just kind of victims in a world that is against us. We're actually to be light in darkness, guiding, influencing, ruling and reigning, and steering this ship into the kingdom of God.
And we like the idea of jumping into the Bible first and showing Daniel and his bros how they walk through that on a much more intense level. And then it kind of helps us zoom in and zoom out and understand these themes and principles. And then you'll start to see these ideas in all the different characters, It's
so
cool.
Before we jump into Daniel, I just want to make note, a few other things that we've got that are coming. This is the second book in the Lion of War series. This is Covenant of War. Cliff Graham. We have reproduced Day of War. And really the content that was added, the storyline that was put in there was really well done, and it's going to carry through all 5 books. So you'll want to go back if you've read Day of War in the past 10 years ago or Covenant of War, you'll want to go back and pick these up and go through them again. They're just an awesome read. It's great content. I think we feed on these kind of storylines, and to have them connected and rooted in biblical context is a win. It really is. It helps us understand the story and the storyline of God. It's characters pulled right out of the Bible. It's what they went through. The main story is what they actually went through, the scriptures that we see. And so these are awesome. That should be available. Man, that might even be, we're hoping 3rd week of July to have that release. So if this airs,
It should be available the day that this airs.
Yeah, they should be available.
Yeah.
Right now.
Go get it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the audiobook for Day of War is right now being worked on, and it's I think Robbie's in the back office right now uploading it and getting it staged with Spotify and Audible and all the major audio outlets. So you'll be able to listen to that. And we have Stefan Rudnicki, who's the voice of that. He was the original voice for Day of War and Covenant of War. He's committed to do all 5 books, and it sounds awesome. The dude still has an awesome voice, if you're wondering. So anyway, just a few resources that we've got, and we're thankful and excited for them. You guys ready to jump into Daniel?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right, little backstory to Daniel. Daniel is a young man when this book begins. He's a teenager. Let's just say that he's 14, 15 years old. By the time later on that he gets to the, if you know the story of Daniel, you're familiar with with some of this, but by the time that he gets to, Daniel in the lion's den, he's much older. Some say he's 80 by that point. And so the bulk of Daniel's life is lived in captivity. Okay. Just so we set the big tone for this story. And we're going to look at chapter 1, the very beginning when he's a teenager and kind of what takes place. So real quick, before this, what's going on? What in the biblical storyline, in God's storyline, what's going on that gets Daniel to the place that he's actually taken captive by a foreign king? He's now living in a foreign land. Why is this going on for God's people? Because Daniel is actually part of the people of Judah. He is from the tribes of Jacob, and he is part of the chosen people. And so why are they now in captivity? And you'll see that all of this is part of God's plan once we dive into it.
Well, I'm actually reading through Deuteronomy right now, which is kind of a restating of a fleshing out an exposition of the 10 Commandments. Really, the structure of Deuteronomy is how to now live in the occupied land of Canaan, and obey God and the commandments that he's given, right? It really puts hands and feet to the way that they're to worship God. And there's long sections in there on how to treat the foreign gods and the idols of the land. When they come in, they're supposed to destroy the idols and the Asherim, right? These symbols, these totems that were idols to foreign gods that they would be worshiped at. They're told, don't intermarry, right? Because when you do that, you're more likely to be pulled away to worshiping the gods of the pagans that you're intermarrying with. It's not about some pure Aryan bloodline, right? It's about the fact that your heart will be pulled away. You see that with King Solomon. It says that the king, Deuteronomy 17, king, don't take many wives because you'll be pulled away to go and worship the gods of those wives. And that's exactly what Solomon does. And so in that book, in Deuteronomy, it's told what will happen. God goes on this tirade in Deuteronomy, I think 5 or something like that, where he's saying, this is what I will do to you if you turn from me. And he starts saying, I will not be against them anymore. I'll be against you. And all the things that I was going to do to them, I'll do to you because you're spitting in my face when I made you a people. I brought you out of Egypt, all of that. And so exactly what he said he would do is what happens, that they would lose their land. They would be sent into exile. But yet
slavery again.
Slavery again. And yet the picture in Daniel is faithfulness, God's faithfulness to those who love him in the midst of their deserved exile. Yeah. Right? Like they're in a deserved exile, but yet God says, if you will soften your heart, if you'll turn back to me, I will hear your prayers. I will bring you back. Right?
Because ultimately he's leveraging exile and slavery to have them turn back to him. It's an instrument he's using to get them back so they're not eternally separated from him.
Yeah, and even farther, so throughout the whole biblical narrative and even the life that you're living today, many of the physical things that you go through in life is a picture and a metaphor of a lot of principles or realities that are going on inwardly, spiritually. And so they get taken into captivity because they have already surrendered their hearts in captivity to foreign gods. And so God allows them to experience externally what physically, they've already done. True, And so we just want to kind of put that out there because for you and for us, all of us, we really we're sons of God wanting to walk faithfully with God. And we live in a world where God is rescuing and redeeming sons and daughters of his. And so much of what God does is a work internally. 1 Samuel 16:7, it says there that God does not look to the height nor the stature of man, but he looks to the heart of man. That reference is referring to David before he's anointed as king, right? And so much about faith and belief and trusting in God. What'd you say?
Short guy verse.
Yes, it is. So much about the work that God is doing. It begins internally and it produces externally, right? And so it really is a work that resurrects and brings to life the heart and the will of man. And it doesn't just leave it behind. We're not moralist. We're not here like many religions out there that just are trying to
Do
pursue
right and get right.
Yeah. We're actually trying to change the nature, or God changes the nature so that way we can live physically different lives.
And that's where we went with this book, and the take off of the qualifications of an elder is it starts internally first before you're able to lead others into that or reign and show others how to do that.
Yeah.
The idea, it starts in your heart first.
And that the growth doesn't come from the discipline to do the things that God requires. The growth comes from, I think, the growth in the faith of who God has now said that you are. And now you are growing into, by faith, what God has said, right? That yes, there are spiritual disciplines, but those spiritual disciplines are a fruit of believing God, right? The believing that the conviction of the Holy Spirit is not condemnation over sin, but a reminder of your identity in Christ, right? When you sense the Holy Spirit is telling you, you shouldn't look at that woman, it's not because that's a voice of condemnation. It's a voice of reminding you that a son of God doesn't objectify a woman, right? Like that applies to everything. And so, yeah, I think that Daniel just hits that really powerfully.
Which is a lot like real life. I mean, if you're discipling or mentoring, or if you're raising children, or if you're married and you're just growing in sanctification as a husband or a wife, so often we have to stop and recognize, all right, I'm walking in an identity that is outside of Christ, and I have to put that off, remove the leaven, get rid of it. Right? Why? Because I am already set apart. I am His. That's why I do this.
Become what you already are.
Yeah, become what He has made you. And so. All right. Well, in the next 4 episodes, we're going to do probably more reading out of the scriptures than we've done in the past. We'll read portions and then discuss and go through this. Hang with us. For those that haven't sat through Bible studies, you'll learn a lot, and this will be enjoyable for you. And it's just good sometimes to just get into the text and let it wrestle us. Does that work?
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Why don't we, where do you guys want to start? Just chapter 1 and 1 through 7? Do you guys want to read this whole thing? Because that's kind of the stage. Once you read that, then we can kind of cherry pick and popcorn through the rest of chapter 1. But probably the first opener here is where we need to start.
That's fine.
You want to read it?
Sure. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them in the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego.
All right. So let's begin. Daniel, like we said, he's a teenager, he's a young man. And so the reality that he's about to begin living in, the captivity that he begins, and really where he lives the rest of his life, it is the product and the fruit of his parents and his grandparents' rebellion to the Lord. And so he has inherited a difficult portion. Is it fair to say that? We don't see in the book of Daniel might be the most righteous figure in the scriptures outside of God, Jesus Christ, the Holy
Joseph.
Spirit.
Yeah,
right.
There's those guys in the Old Testament. Boaz, Joseph, Daniel, they don't do a lot wrong.
And when I say righteous, I mean that there's not a lot of recognition of their failures. That's not to say he wasn't a man of sin or that he didn't need saved or atoned for by Christ. He absolutely did. It is to say that in the scriptures, the story that we don't get a lot of his negative quality. And so this isn't a man that has, his captivity is not necessarily solely self-inflicted. It is the product of the generations above him. And this is just a part of life that we have to realize, especially at this point in our life. I just turned 41. How old are you, Justin?
31.
You're 31. How old are you?
33.
Please act like you're that far behind. So here we are in our 30s. And the reality is our children are just under Daniel's age. And they are inheriting so much of the life that we have been a part of, that we've created, and also the life that was given to us from our parents. Mm-hmm. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with Daniel, what's really interesting is that you don't see the sort of victim mentality that many of the Israelites had and many people today have. I mean, you got a lot of men that sit and whine because they didn't have a good dad, or, their dad yelled at them too much or wasn't there. And there's a level where they allow victim to be their identity. And you see that Daniel, in the face of really the worst situation, intense, where most scholars believe that these boys were all emasculated. They'd become eunuchs, right? They had cut off their testicles, if you don't know what any of that means, marched them across the desert to this new land. So now their literal manhood has been removed. Yeah. And yet all of this, you could say, if they're only 14, they probably haven't been wicked rebels. It's said that they were of the royal family and of nobility. They were the good kids. Like, they took the good kids. They took the cream of the crop. And now they marched them into a place, and now they're in exile because of the sins of their fathers. But you never see Daniel or the other three boys ever allowing themselves the chance to sulk, to complain, to blame it on their forefathers. I mean, Israel nonstop is blaming everything on the generation before them, blaming everything on the guy next to them. But what these four boys do is they look around and they say, God, why do you have me here? How can I be faithful in whatever it is that I'm in, despite the circumstances that got me here? And for so many men, you are stuck. You're stuck on a hamster wheel of blame and of guilt and of shame. I don't have anything that rhymes with guilt. That would have been nice. You're stuck on this hamster wheel because you can't just surrender the sins of that you committed and that were committed against you in your past, and now walk in your identity as beloved child of God, as a son of God, as Daniel and these three boys do, right? And that really sets them apart, is that they didn't let circumstances externally dictate their faithfulness to God and their belief that he was going to see them through.
Yes.
And that's so critical for us, because it's just easier to blame it on somebody else. Look at Adam. Oh, it's the wife you gave me, right? He blamed it on God, really. Yeah. Like, he blamed God. You didn't give me a good woman, right? It's easy to blame it on somebody else, but what they're doing is they're taking responsibility and saying, here I am, send me. What do you want me to do?
And the idea, think about like a king that's trying to take over. You've captured this nation. You bring them into slavery. You grab their leaders, the children of the leaders, nobility, like the elite. And if you can emasculate them, brainwash them, control them, most of the rest are just going to follow by nature. So these guys come, they're young men. And if you look at just the name change, so not only being emasculated, but Daniel is God is my judge. His new name now means, O Lady Wife of God of, is it Bel?
Bel, yeah. Bel.
And then Hananiah was Yahweh is gracious, and then it becomes Shadrach, which is I am very fearful of God. Mishael is who is what God is, and then it becomes I am fearful of God, and then Abednego is servant of the shining one of Nebu. So basically, all of their names that were of honoring God, fear of God, love God, serve God, to the antagonist.
I am what God is.
Yeah.
that's a crazy
to false
name.
gods.
Yeah. Talk about
chopped
identity.
off their manhood into slavery. But like you said, they didn't whine about it. They had resolved and stayed faithful to God despite that.
Yeah, from a young age.
And we
young men.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. And if you're going to bail on If you're going to take context, like the environment I live in, I don't want to suffer, so I want to live a good life. These dudes had it made. They were already in the royal court. They were already recognized. They could have just ditched their God and lived faithfully in Babylon and done their thing and had a good life, right? But there was character and resolve. There was true faith born and birthed in them prior to this. And this is what God is going to use and leverage to begin to fulfill his story, right? Like this is what honest Christians do. Real Christians, when you're plucked and pulled and placed in an environment that is foreign to you, you are still a Christian. You still belong to Christ, right? And that's what we see in Daniel, their faithfulness to God despite everything else around them. And that's the storyline that we want to use to talk about, maybe our own identity or who we are today. We do not get our identity from the world around us, nor the nature of it. So how Christian or how ungodly it is. We are Christians first, living in whatever land God has placed us in, right? And that has to be lived out. Like that's the story that we're faithful to. If there's one thing that marks Daniel's life, it's probably, the quality of being faithful, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and that's what, we don't pray to live in Babylon.
No.
Like a lot of Christians for a long time have almost yearned for persecution because they think that makes the most sold out Christians. Yeah. And there's a level where it does, the fires of persecution does often stoke the fire of the Spirit. But there's a level where we don't want to pray for Babylon, but we do want to recognize exactly what you're saying is that the calling of God for you as a man, for them and for everyone who's a Christian, is to become what you want the world around you to change into, not change into what the world is in order to reach them in some false missiology, some false style of evangelism, right? So many of us as men, we become like chameleons, and when we're on a job site, we transform into a job site guy who cusses and smokes and does everything like that, right? Everywhere we go, we turn into someone else, right? When really God is saying, no, you should hold the standard, be who I've called you to be in whatever situation that you're in, and let the world around you, by the light shining out of you because you're rooted in your identity, let that light now change the world around you rather than the opposite. Yeah. And that's what these guys do. And I mean, just a point on that identity, the name thing. I'm not saying if you already have kids and you haven't given them strong names that mean something, don't feel any guilt or shame. But there's a level where it is our job as men, as fathers, as upcoming fathers, if you're a young man listening to this, as grandfathers, if you're an old man, that you are to impart identity to your children and to your grandchildren and to the people that are around you, because the pagans figured that out. They knew. Why would they didn't give them new names because they were afraid that their gods wouldn't accept slaves that had Israelite names. Right. They gave them new names because they knew that that was fundamental to their identity. Jacob was a heel grabber, and God changed his name to Israel, right? You talk about Abram and Abraham. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a level where bound up within a name in biblical culture was who you were. Yeah. Right? Their name, Jacob was named Jacob because the laughter, because they couldn't have a child in their old age, right? Like all this, there's all these pictures, and it's your job now today as a father to impart that identity upon your children, because the world around you is going to be seeking to re-identify them, right? They're going to seek to take their mind and shift it and then say, you identify as whoever you want to identify. If you want to hit the transgender movement, you identify as whatever you feel inside, and we'll tell you what you need to feel inside. And now you can identify as what you want. And it's so important for us to tell our children who they are. Yes. Right? You don't speak that way just because it's a rule of mine. You don't speak that way because you're a child of God. And a child of God doesn't speak that way, and you know that, right? Like we're supposed to be imparting that.
I mean, it's exactly what God has done for us. If you think about when you introduce yourself, I am Casey, I am
Yeah.
the great I am. He calls him God as I am. Like he imparted his fathership over us, even if you choose to identify under a different name or whatever. His name is before you mention anything. I am Casey.
That's good.
I am Travis. Like it's our role to carry that out.
And so what we've done in our household, because I'm a first generation Christian in my family, there was loose scattered believers at some point, but really first generation Christian. And so Eric and I, as we came into our home, before we even had children, we sat down, and there was times where God had us search the scriptures and seek out values that we wanted to claim for our family culture. Hospitality was a big one for my wife, that she wanted always to live a life that was very hospitable, to reach out, to love, to be kind, to make space for others. There's always room at the table, that kind of mindset. And so we began to take on values that were close to God or that he cared about and take them as our own. So when we talk to our children and say, look, you're a Wilson now, what we're telling them, and we tell them what Wilsons do is we are hospitable. We are this, we are this. And I think that is the right thing as Christians do. For you guys as Bonners, it's right for you to look to your children and say, look, you're a Bonner, and this is what the Bonners do. It's not to say that you have to be a carpenter for the rest of your life. It's to say that you have to be this quality, this character, this nature, which is set apart to God. That's who we are. We follow God. And as followers of him, this is how we identify. And that helps. It really does help your children. I still remember the day, because I came to faith 17, 18, 19, right in that time. I remember the time Erica made me this gift one year for my birthday. I think I was 20, 21 at the time. And she took my name and then she wrote out the definitions of, or like the meaning of my name, but she connected it to scriptures. And so for the very first time in my life, when I began to think about what my name was, Casey, my middle name, Ryan, what I began to think about was no longer just, it's just this Casey Ryan Wilson. It put value to it. Right? Watchful is a word that's connected to my name. And so I began to identify myself as I'm called to be watchful. This is part of what God has for me, not just to be generic Casey Ryan Wilson. And it was redemptive to who I was. Anyway.
But the overflow of Daniel is the next step. Like, if you look at verse 8, it says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Daniel resolved. His resolve came from his identity and him understanding who he was in Christ.
Yeah, he belonged to him.
And this was the start of his extraordinary life of standing firm in the faith of God and who God was to him, despite everything that was to come. But it was rooted in his value and his worth and who God said he was. Like, that's the entry, the beginning, the end. We've said this a million times, but like, I read over that line, but Daniel resolved, a million times as I've read this book. Yeah. And then the last time we really dove into Daniel, I was like, my goodness, that was the catalyst part there. That was the beginning of faithfulness. That was not being conformed to this new culture, world, name, identity shit. Like, he put roots into Christ right there and was like, this is where I'm standing.
You're looking at verse 8, right? But Daniel resolved. So that my translation, it says, but Daniel set his heart, in his heart.
Yeah.
And so it literally is who owns the heart.
Done.
That's where resolution comes from, right? Conviction, standards. It comes from, it's gripped my heart to the point that I can't go against this. This is who I am. Right? Everything about me is set apart to God. So the world around me can't change that.
Your words, your speech, everything is the overflow from the heart. So when you root that in him, it takes you getting in this and understanding what he says about you and how he is with you and his nature. But like, once you solidify that, I'm not saying life is easy, but you see like that changed the course of where he was going from here on out.
Absolutely.
Oh, I looked at some of this, and I looked at some of that etymology of resolved, because some of them say set his heart, or established, or decided is probably the worst one. But really decided, but it could be said established in the inner man.
That's pretty good.
Like because the heart for us is very twisted, the way that we talk about the heart. The heart we talk about as the seat of emotions.
Yes, for sure.
But when the Bible talks about the heart, it actually talks about like the bowels, like in your gut. Like it's talking about in your inner person, when no one's around, you decided, I will go this far and no further. Right? Like it's, you think about Martin Luther at the Diet of Worms, when he's standing there and they have all of his books. So did you write this? Are you Martin Luther? Did you write this? Did you say this about the church? Do you believe this? And he panicked and said, I need a night. He waffled. The next day he comes back and he says, I can do no other. I'm bound by my conscience. To sin against conscience would be neither right nor safe. Right. And he says, here I stand. I can do no other. Right. And there's a level where he decided in his inner man, he established, I'm not changing that. And he established in his heart an action. Right. He established that I am God's. We know he had to have already established that. That's something that's reading between the lines of the first half of this first little picture here of their life. He didn't just go, okay, at this point now I'm God's, because so many of us, we wait until a test comes. A test comes from God. Right? God cannot be tempted with sin, but he does test our faith for our sake. And you can't wait until the test comes to decide to be resolved. Like you can't decide when you have your phone in your hand looking at the porn, now I'm going to settle in my heart. Daniel had established, he had a lot of time to think as he was walking across the desert, probably bleeding from his wound from having his nuts cut off. He had a long time to think, what am I going to do when I get there? Like who am I going to be in this land? Yeah. He doesn't know when he's coming back. We know from Jeremiah that he said that the exile would only be 70 years. Yep. But right, Daniel is going, I don't know if I'm walking away from my identity that I had, and I don't know that I'll ever come back. Who am I going to be whenever I get there? And I don't think Daniel waited for a testing of his obedience and his faith to resolve in his heart that he was God's and God was his.
Yeah, I think he had a different mindset. We often think of tests like they come and go like you did in school, right? You know, a test is coming. In 4 weeks, we're going to take this test. In 4 weeks, we're going to take that test. It is better for us to actually look at everything all day, every day. Everything that you ever go through is part of God's means to sanctify you, right? I mean, even the opening line here, verse 2, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. That was into King Nebuchadnezzar's hand. And so the captivity was part of God's plan. And it was part of the, whether you want to call it test, trial, whatever, it was the means to sanctify the hearts in the people. Right? And so everything that you're going through every day, if we make the assumption that I walk with God today, from the moment I rise to the moment I go to bed, if I could have or impart to my children anything, it would be that they would, when they wake, they would give their day to the Lord. And when they go to bed, they would set their mind to him, right? That they would rest in him. But their motivation, it's like right now my kids are going, they have a soccer camp that they go to. So they're there for about 4 days. And then they've got about 4 hours of the day that it's at home, it's chores, it's other things. But for them, it's play to play, task to task, chore to chore. Like in their mind, it's just about running these goals. And if I could get it to the point to where they realize, wait a minute, I'm going to live my life, whatever happens today, in the soccer game, while I'm at lunch, in all that I do, how do I live this moment so that I'm honoring and pleasing to the Lord? That would be the thing that I think Daniel had when he set his heart to follow the Lord. That's what he had that is unique and what is true and faithful to him. That is what a Christian does. That's what you want to train into yourself and into your kids. Right?
Yeah, I think that test language is difficult, and I'm trying to pull together kind of an abstract thought, but there's a level where if you are Christ's, if you are God's, your sanctification and your glorification is inevitable.
Yep.
Right? Like it uses those whom he justified, he will also sanctify in Romans 8. But glorified is in the past tense in Romans 8. And so there's a level where when you are Christ, you are already glorified with him. Ephesians expounds on this, and you're already seated with him in the heavenly places. So your growth in maturity, the path of the righteous is like the dawning of the sun that grows brighter and brighter until noonday, Proverbs 4:18. And so the growth in sanctification and Christ-likeness is inevitable. So instead of looking at a testing of your faith as a pass-fail moment to either get approved by or disappoint God, look at it more as this bridge will be built. And as we're building it, if a part collapses, I don't trash the bridge and get mad at it. No. I know this bridge has to get built. It will get built, right? God has set his love upon us, and he has purchased us, and his purchase was not only guaranteeing us heaven and not hell, but his purchase guarantees us Christ's likeness here on the earth, affecting the world around us.
But his purchase, even more than that, is reuniting us with him.
Yes.
So like the bridge being built, us maturing, us moving on, us being sanctified, glorified, in a way, follow me for a second, becomes irrelevant when you focus on him. Those are byproducts of that. Like whenever I do something contrary to this or immature or sinful, he is convicting me and squeezing my heart and, hey, I don't do that. Yeah. We're not like that. This is what I do. This is how you love people. This is how you don't ignore people. This is how you care. This is how you're compassionate. So guys, once you understand whose you are and how much God loves you and you're a son, you love that. Just like your kids love spending time with you and you play sports with them or whatever they want to do. Even if you absolutely hate it, you want to do it because it's your kid, because you love them. And when you understand he has that for us, you can't help but want to read more and pray more. And whenever you're selfish and you would rather do something like watch a movie instead of read your Bible, like you mature in that. But like the maturing isn't the goal.
No, it's the fruit.
It happens.
It's necessary, right?
And it's a measuring device to see like, wow, okay, I've been coasting, I've been chilling, I haven't been involved as a father or a husband or leading well. But like, if you stay fixated on him, like Daniel's resolve, his roots, his heart was anchored in God loves me.
Yes.
And then he was prepared for whatever came later. He wasn't like, I'm going to be thrown in a lion's den. I need to be ready right now. He wasn't concerned about that. He was fixated. Hey, you can't pray to me. You have to pray to this. He's like, no, I'm praying to God. I don't care what you say. I'm going to do the same thing. God's the prize.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 1 Peter 3:18. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God. Right? Like that he might take us by the hand and lead us back to who we were designed to be in the garden. We were designed for union, right? And now we've flipped that. And what I mean by being prepared for those tests is the fact that you have to recognize that in your life, you're going to live.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like you're going to live in this world as a Christian. And so, yes, focusing on what could happen is unwise. Focusing on the one who has bought you is the way to grow so that when that situation arises, your circumstances don't dictate how you behave. You behave like Christ.
So let's finish on that note because, and you started to talk about it. In life, there's a foundation in my walk with the Lord that I have to return to. And that's honestly where I find my motivation and my strength and my joy and so much of what I need to go about my day. And this is what I mean. When it comes to fighting against lust or when it comes to fighting against anger or frustrations or any other sin that might capture us, right? When it comes to fighting those, oftentimes we defer to external motivations to conquer them. You know, get 30 days of accountability with a guy and you'll overcome that desire. You'll rewire all those things. You know, if you only just stop doing this, change the way that you manage money, do this. It's always external. If you can find, and if you can, what God gives us is a rock solid, fundamental, life-changing, relationship-changing motivation, which is him and him alone. So that way, when it's you and you're solely alone and all those external means are not there to keep you accountable in life, you still have God, you still have your Father, you still have Christ, so that way you can live out the life that Daniel has, right? At the bottom, every man, I mean, when you work with men, when it comes to their marriage or life or porn or any of those things, eventually you got to get to a place where you ask them, what's your motivation for fighting against this? And if all they have is external things, they still have not been they still have not found the greatest motivation, which will get them out of or fighting against the sin that has caught them. You have to get to a place, especially as men, because we are to be the heads of our wives and the leaders of our homes. We have to get to a place that our motivation is God first. There's so many other motivations. There really are good motivations out there. But the greatest, the most enabling motivation out of everything is God and God alone. Fair? Mm-hmm. I mean, you've felt this as men, right? To go home and love your wife faithfully, knowing that she might have had a tough day or your kids are going to have a fight or all these other things, you have to ground that in God so that way you have the strength to go in and do that rightly. You do, because you're not going to get it at that moment from the external world, right? You're just not. To make tough decisions in your business for this place, to make decisions that honor him, it has to be rooted in him and not necessarily in numbers or profit or other things, other metrics that people put out there. It has to be rooted in how is this going to affect or what is this going to do in my relationship with the Lord? It's the sole motivation of Daniel. It's the sole motivation of all of us. It's where we see Jesus return every time that he tries to depart from the people and get alone. He's not getting alone with himself. He's getting alone so that way he's in the presence of his Father and he can be healed, walked, restored, sanctified. That process of being strengthened by seeking after your Father. Like that's what we see in Scripture. That's what we see in all of the great saints of old. David did it, Abraham, all the men, they do this. They have a unique, intimate relationship with God, which is fundamental to everything that they do.
Yeah, and I think that with Daniel, I could be wrong, but I don't know that the primary motivation for Daniel's refusal to eat the king's food was a fear of judgment by God. Right, like that could have been part of it, but I think there was a level where internally Daniel was looking at what is going to set me apart and continue setting me apart as God's and not yours.
Yeah.
Right, and so he's deciding in his heart that we're not going to eat this food because we're God's and we're not like you.
Yep.
Right, and so he's resting in the fact that, okay, God, I'm not doing this to be approved by you. I'm doing this because I am yours, and I want them to see that.
That I'm yours.
Right? And there's a level where in your life as a man, you'll start to live, if you can grasp the fact that you are united with Christ, that you are beloved, you are a beloved son of God, then all of a sudden your motivation no longer becomes approval. Your motivation becomes what is going to yield greater union with Christ, right? You think about Hebrews chapter 12 after the hall of faith. Therefore, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. But it says, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us. And he gives two categories there. And one of them is sin, and the other one is not sin, is what he's saying. But there's a way that you can run a race with plates in your pockets.
Yeah.
That you're going, this is stupid. You can run a marathon with ankle weights on, right? And that's not wrong. That's not cheating in the race, but it's stupid.
Yeah.
And there's a level where Daniel's going, I think, Daniel's not saying, God, you're going to strike me down if I eat this food. He's saying this is a weight that is going to hinder my calling in this place. And so when he says, I've resolved in my heart to be God's and God's alone, and I'm going to walk by the Spirit, I'm going to hear what God wants me to do, and I'm going to act on that conviction. I'm going to act on the impulse of God in my life that I feel that's wrong. Then all of a sudden, God supernaturally makes them I mean, my gosh, he makes them look handsome and they're vegetarians. Like that's a miracle. You know what I mean? That is miraculous. Romans says he who eats vegetables only is weak. You know what I mean? So like, but there's a level where God makes he supernaturally blesses them, and now they're elevated again. Now they're more wise. They're more understanding. Daniel is interpreting dreams, and that was just simply by walking in obedience, not out of a fear of approval by God, but out of the resolve that this is not what's best for us and for our witness to the unbelieving world, that we are his. Yep. And for so many men, we start to look at, because we project our view of God, our view of ourselves, and maybe our own fathers onto God, and everything we're doing. And I struggle with this more than anybody. I've struggled with that I'm projecting onto God that everything I do is being looked at with approval or disapproval by God, instead of understanding that, yes, while I still sin, God sees me through the lens of Christ, that he became sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And so when he sees me now, it's only approval. And everything that he's doing in my life and the situations that I'm in are sanctifying me, are burning off the dross, the unbelieving part of me, right? It's the enemy. It's my faith that the enemy wants to devour like a prowling lion. And he wants to devour my faith, because when my faith goes, I start to misidentify myself as united with Christ. And so there's this reality where for us as men, we need to believe what God says about us and then walk out of that and start to cast aside the things that might not be sin. You might not find a verse for them in the Bible, but you recognize this is hindering me and my union with him. Like, I can't find the verse to support not watching Yellowstone. But I haven't watched it, but I've heard it might not be the best thing for your Christian walk. Like I'm not trying to place a yoke on your neck, but I'm saying that there's just things that sometimes we have to look at and go, is this the best thing to promote faithfulness? Yep. Right. And that's, I think, the lens that Daniel is operating out of. That's something that we can definitely, I think, glean a ton from. Right? That we're not seeking approval, that we're living as approved.
That's good.
And how can I grow in that?
So let's close with that. Gentlemen, if you are, whatever task, whatever thing that you have today, ground yourself in the Lord first, right? And then for those around you or those that you are leading, make sure that you affirm their identity first and not just their task or what they have to do. This happened to me this morning. I have a son who I'm working with, and I'm so trying to get him to work through some of his vices and the sins that he's fighting off. And so this morning, the first time I saw him, I walk upstairs and immediately I went to, hey, today, this is what you're going to do. And he interrupts me. And it's such a gut check. He interrupts me and he grabs me. And he goes, Dad, good morning. And he smiles and looks me in the face and just grabbed me and started chuckling. And I grabbed him and I said, you're right, son. Good morning. And there is, there is identity is what changes us. It's not the task mandates. It's not the ruling and the beating and the lording over. But if you can learn to love and follow after a different standard, it will change everything in your life. It really does, right? And so I have to spend far more time as a good husband and a good father, affirming the identity of my wife and who she is, affirming the identity of my children, and make sure I'm doing that. So that way, when I come and I correct or I guide them, it's in part, not in full. Does that?
So for you to do that, first you need to do it for yourself with this. Man. So guys, don't miss this. For me to be able to realize, because you could have missed that little nudge from your son.
Dude.
And you could have been like, you interrupted me. And you just go to teach and just miss everything. So it's your job to be attentive to that, to see my son got me here. Like,
he got
value, identity. But see, you get that because you're in this. So men, you have to understand, like whenever I see my kids or myself doing something stupid or sinful, I'm like, why? because I had fear of this. I had like my identity was placed somewhere else. The value, the important thing in front of my eyes, I placed somewhere else other than Christ. Yep. So you gather knowledge and the wisdom and the resolve in your heart to anchor your identity in Him by this, and then you can go and replicate that with everybody around you.
Yep. Yeah, I think just to end for the third time, I think that imparting of the identity is exactly what you're saying, is that it has to be telling your kids, telling your wife, telling the people around you who they are based on who God says they are, not based on what they do, based on how they perform, right? Because that, I think one of the picture not a lot of people talk about is that in Genesis, Adam calls Eve bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, Ish and Isha, like she is called woman, for she was taken out of man. And that's what he called her. The you and me are this. And then as soon as the fall happens, it says, and Adam called his wife Eve, which means the mother of all living. And so right there, it switched from who she was to what she does, right? Like instead of this is who you are, and I'm affirming that, now it's what you do, your productivity is your identity. And that's so often what we do with our wives and with our children, and how we project how God views what we do.
Dude.
What we do versus who we are.
Do you ever, oh man, I just got convicted. Do you ever, if your children are in the room, do you ever refer to your wife as mom?
Yeah. Not as much as I should.
Sometimes I'm like, hey mom, what do you think about this? And I'll her identity for me, she should not be, she's not my mother. She's not mom. She's my wife. Right. And maybe that's just one of those subtle, misguidings that you're doing every day. I'm going to stop doing that. No longer. Never calling Erica mom again.
Yeah.
Unless I'm referring to Erica, the children.
Yeah. That's good.
Anyway, that's subtle, but man, to affirm my wife's identity first as a daughter of the Lord and then as my wife, rather than just her task to be a mother.
Yeah. That's good.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. This is the Kavod Family Podcast. Our desire is that we would live lives that are honorable, that are glorious, because God is honorable and Christ is glorious. He is the chief aim that we pursue. If anyone's worthy of honor and glory, it is Christ. We hope you enjoyed this.